horizontal cooperation. And I think Democrats should strive more for horizontal cooperation, besides and together with vertical cooperation, and ask how we can overcome powerlessness by getting together, supporting each other, and building some form of efficient organization. And beyond this first point of criticism or critical reflection of Weber's definition, there's a second point. That is, he does not look at the psychological aspects of power and powerlessness. Power does not only have an objective, but also a subjective side, being two sides of the same coin. So what do we mean by this subjective dimension? It's our perception, our feeling and thinking, our images and predispositions, the way and the outcome, how we learned how to deal with power and weakness. So power in this subjective dimension is essentially built upon the way we think and feel about it, as subordinates or as a boss, for example. On what kind of experience we had as kids, as young people, or as adults. And how we digested or used our experience in our psyche and biography. And finally, which attitudes we develop and which patterns of behavior we practice during the process of lifelong socialization. For example, whether we lean towards authority, whether we follow the patterns of learned helplessness, or whether in the sense of psychoanalysis we develop some good ego strength and act with autonomy. The way how we deal with power and powerlessness strongly determines the quality of social and political relations. Hence the chances for the development of a democratic political culture and a viable civil society. The concept and practice of civil society, as Professor Bakaibo already mentioned, independent from both the state and the market, are functionally necessary elements to enhance a society's capacity to solve its problems in consensus and conflict. This is especially true for post-communist societies, where civil society by tradition is comparatively weak, of course with a lot of differences among Central European and more Eastern European countries. But here it's important that this is a precondition if they want to take the road to pluralist democracy. Therefore, the concept of civil society is neither an utopian idea nor a fashionable notion. After having turned to these more basic aspects of how we understand power and the level of analysis and how they are related, I'd like to come back and more focus on the two lead questions. What makes us powerless and what makes us strong? Looking at power relations in everyday life, and this is basically the level I'm choosing here, I would like to put forward 10 provocative theses, aiming at the acting subject. They combine different kinds and levels of statements because they aim at some critical reflection and orientation for action in the understanding of a humanistic psychology. These 10 theses describe and explain, they interpret and propose, and thus may prompt to think of alternative ways how to deal with power and powerlessness. Therefore, I do not use impersonal subjects, but rather the personal pronoun we or us and me. Well, this does not imply a purely subjectivist or even pedagogical attitude to teach somebody from outside, and I hope it will not be received this way. Well, thesis number 1. Beyond law and structures, in personal interaction, the other has only that much power as given to him by myself. Within given formal institutional settings, you may perceive and use your power in different ways, whether at the top or more to the bottom of the hierarchy. Just think of a director of an institute or a head of a group, of a department in some factory. They can perform their roles in a very different way. There is the institutional setting, there are rules, there are kind of grown power relations, but still becoming a director or a boss or whatever new role, you will see there are different styles, different patterns of how people use roles. So there is some leeway, there is some space of maneuvering how you can use power. Beyond legal norms and established structures, in a psychological perspective, we can observe this pattern of power transfer in personal interactions. If many persons have power over others, then there are always two sides. One that gives the power and makes the other superior, and the other one that takes the power. It makes others inferior to him. Consciously or not, we create asymmetric and interdependent power relations. We are all familiar with the dialectics of master and servant. What is the master without his servant? What is a boss without employees? What is a minister without a ministry? Or, my dear colleagues, what is a professor without his assistants and students? Second thesis. In social relations, superior power, which I suppose I have to bow to, in reality, is rather often based on the force of habit or on voluntary acceptance. We often speak of the superior strength of conditions, or in a more even abstract way, of the system that forces us to do something. Things that are just given and cannot be changed. Yet some power relations are reproduced only, or predominantly, because we accept them without critical reflection, why they are so, or why they are regarded as legitimate. We often make ourselves believe that we are without influence. But in reality, it's not the constraint of conditions, but the constraints we impose on ourselves. And they may drive us into resignation. Thus, we reinforce and legitimize structures and power relations in which we feel powerless and discontented, and that we do not dare to leave. The third thesis, our evaluation strongly determines the impact of power and the prestige of the powerful. It's only our judgment and recognition that makes power appear to be morally good or politically legitimate. We give other people and groups, leaders and institutions, their rank and prestige. In this process of social and political ascription, it often happens that we overestimate them